The first step in moving on in our project is to actually convert the CSS code that we've been written so far to Sass code. And so we're going to set up a couple of variables, and we're also going to nest selectors where that makes sense. And so here we are back in our Sass code. And actually we already have a lot of variables here going on, so mainly with the colors. But let's see if we can find some more. So I think for the colors, we already have variables for everything, right? I don't really see another color going on here. Or actually here is black. So why not also having a variable for black? So color black. Because again, later down the road, we may decide that the black that we want is not really complete black, but maybe only some really dark gray. And then we would have to change all of that manually. And so it's better to always have a variable so that we can change it very easily and very quickly. And so now I can replace it here, color black, and of course the same thing here. Now again, doing so with the RGBA and then defining a hexadecimal color in here only works with Sass. So in regular CSS, we really have to define the colors here separately for R, G, and B with a number ranging between 0 and 255, such as we had before. But now in Sass, we can put a hexadecimal number here, like we have with the black color, and then the RGBA function is still going to work. Alright, and there are no more color variables here. Now some people like to go really crazy here and also specify variables for all of this stuff, like family, weight, line height, and all of that. But I think that's not really necessary, because in fact we're only ever specifying this code once here. So not having this Lato font family all over the place. It's really just here. And so in fact we're only defining it in one place. And so there's no need to have a variable. Alright? Now remember that we're still having here in the background this terminal running, where it's still detecting all the time if we're doing some changes to our Sass code, and then each time we change anything, it actually reloads the page, right? And so all of the changes that we did already should be reflected in here. And so during the development of this entire project, I will just keep this running here in the background, and we don't have to worry about this anymore. So this is our development setup. And now that we have our variables set up, at least for now, let's take a look at nesting our selectors. So remember that we're using the BEM methodology, so a block element modifier. And so we're using all of these really low specificity selectors. So we have header, header logo box, header text box, and so on and so forth. And so when we select these elements, we always do this just with the class selector. And so all of our selectors, they're really just only one class selector with one class. So they all have the same specificity, which is extremely low. Also, since each and every element actually has a class, nesting can be a bit difficult here, right? It looks like there is not much to nest here, right? It's different from the example that we had when we first looked at Sass, where we did simply nest all the elements. Like we had, remember, UL, and then in there we had the LI, and then in there we had the A. So right now we don't have that kind of structure because every element has its own class. But still, we can do nesting here. And I'm going to show you how. And this is how we do it. So remember what the ampersand operator does? It copies this selector here that we have up until this point, right? So actually all of this. So it's dot header. So if we now want to specify this declaration block here, we can actually write it this way, logo box. And that's it. So we copy the code in here, and here we go. So this is now nested inside each other, and the code, when compiled, will be exactly the same. Because again, this header here, it's like it's copied here. So imagine that we copy it, and then we paste it here, and so it looks exactly the way we had before, right? And so instead of having to write header all the time in each single element that we want to select, we can just use nesting like this. So let's put these all together here, all of these which have to do with the header. So it's all of these. And then we can just replace the header with the ampersand operator. Now here in Visual Studio Code, when I select something and then hit Command D, it will automatically select the next instance, which is the same. So you see here I have header selected, and you see that already down here it's becoming with a different color, and now if I hit Command D, then it also gets selected. And you see these two cursors here blinking. So we have multiple cursors now, and if I now write the ampersand, it will replace both of them. Alright, so again, this is not really a CSS feature, but it's a feature of this text editor, and I know that Atom does this as well, and probably also brackets, and I know that Sublime Text also does it. And so you can try to figure out how your text editor does this trick. It's really handy sometimes to replace multiple instances of the same text all at the same time. Alright, and so that's it. So I really like this approach with nesting the selectors like this, because you see it's like really all encapsulated, all in this big one header block, okay? So when scanning down our code, we can see, okay, this is the header, then inside we have this declarations for the header, and then from there we move down to this element logo box, logo, and text box. Okay, so let's save this and let's actually take a look at the style CSS. And so here you see that actually what I explained you is exactly what is working. So you have the header declaration block, which starts here, ends here. Then we have the header logo box, the header logo. So exactly what we had before doing this nesting, right? So we change this into Sass, but it looks exactly the same in the output. So this is what we wanted. Now the next thing here with the heading primary. So we can do the same here, right? So let's actually do it. And all we have to do is to basically, not that much code. Oh, this is really fast. So cut this one and put it in here. Because this is heading primary main, so this is the modifier here, right? And so now here, such as we had before, I can replace it with the ampersand. And that's actually it. So it will be heading primary dash dash main, and here dash dash sub. Alright, makes sense? So again, it's this nicely encapsulated block, which now contains all of the code for the heading primary, all at the same time. And we can now do the same thing here with the button, of course. So we have button link, visited, hover, active. So these for pseudo classes, and then here this modifier, and then this pseudo element, and we can wrap them all into one huge block, okay? So how do we do that? And actually I want you to do it. So it's a small challenge here. So pause the video and try to nest all of this code into one huge block. Maybe it's not exactly easy at this point, but it's a nice challenge, and so I hope that you can manage to do it. Hopefully you managed to do that. So let's now take a look how I would do it. So actually, let's start by just writing button here, and then start by copying all of that in there. Okay, and so now we can just remove this here, and such as again, replace this with the ampersand operator. And now I will start hitting Command D to select all of these button instances, okay? So button, button, and there's more button, button. Okay, and that's it. And so now replace all of these with the ampersand. Okay, so we have now button linked, button visited, button hover, button active, button white, and button after, and button white after, and button hover after, and button animated. Okay, but this is still not perfect, right? Because we can do more. We can also replace this part here because it's already here. Makes sense? So we can just do it like this. Copy this entire thing in here and take this out. Okay, makes sense. So let's try to read that. So here we have, this will translate to button dash dash white, and then here it will translate to button dash dash white, and then the after pseudo class. Okay, does it make sense? Now we can do the same thing in here. So let's go to the hover part, which is up there. and put it here. All right, so again, this was repeated, this part, right? So let me put it back very shortly. So this was already here. So why write it again? We can just take it out and replace it with the ampersand operator here. And so this is going to translate to button hover after. And I think that now we're good. Now everything is nicely nested, and I think it makes a lot more sense like this. It's easier to read, and it's all encapsulated in this small block that we have. Now I know that it may take some time to get used to this nesting and to make sense out of it, but you'll see that with practice, and maybe with all the practice that you're going to take while we're building this project, after that it will make sense to you and you will be so used to it that it's no problem anymore. Just one last final check to see if everything is still working, and yes, it is. So our button works exactly the same as before. So all the logic was preserved even after we changed all of this code here, okay? So that was my goal for this lecture. So we're now ready to move on.